In this lesson, we'll look into choosing a good rotation order for our control objects that we'll want to rotate to help us to prevent gimbal lock. If we recall, gimbal lock is where when one of our axes meets up with another one of our axes, and when we rotate either or, we still end up with the same result. So that can run into animation problems, and definitely ones that we want to avoid. But what I find works best is to switch the rotation order so we can avoid that altogether, okay, or a majority of it. So if we go ahead and select our chest, for example, go to our rotate tool. Right now I have it just set to gimbal, and you could easily switch that holding E, holding the left mouse button, and there it is, gimbal right to the right of local. But once we have that selected, this helps us to see exactly what rotation axis that we're rotating our controls on. I find that ZXY works best for our rotation order for objects for the majority of our controls, if not all of them. So for example, right now we have our control object set to X, Y, Z, and we can see that by going right to our attribute editor, going to the first tab once we've selected our control. I'll even go to the perspective so we can get a better view in here. Okay, but see, it's set to X, Y, Z. So what's that going to tell us? Well, as we roll in the Y, okay, and this is all based off of how the body is supposed to move. So with our upper body, for example, we'd what we currently have, if we keep it with X, Y, Z, okay, it looks pretty nice. We have our roll in the Y, and notice how our X is also following. So as we move that down, okay, great, that seems pretty good. But what about the Z? Notice how it's not following the same axis when we go ahead and roll it in the Y as the X is. So we'd run into some gimbal lock problems, especially if we really rolled them to the side. Okay, we'd eventually meet up with that Z axis. So I just undid those moves, and I'll undo back to 0. So again, I find that X, Z, Y works best in this situation. So we'll switch it to X, Z, Y, and notice now, as we roll in the Y, not only is the X moving as we'd like it to, but also notice the Z, how that's aligned with the same axis as the X. So we're able to get a nice shift to the side in the body when we move that. And if you're curious as to how this works, it's as simple as this for our rotation order, that is. Our Z, okay, since it comes first, when we move the Z, it's not going to move any other axis. Notice how just the Z is moving when we go ahead and move that. With the X, that's going to drive our Z. So when we move the X, notice how it's moving the Z axis as well. And when we move the Y, of course, that's going to move everything. So we'll go ahead and select that, making sure we get the right selection there. Great. So notice that's going to move everything. So that's how that works. So again, we're going to want to switch our controls, being that that's the case, to ZXY. So we'll go ahead and select our controls and do that for all of them that we'll want to have rotate, or all of them that will rotate. So that's our hips, our upper body controls. We have our feet. Go ahead and select those. Okay, and if you don't want to select any of the joints accidentally, you can just hide them under show. So we could just make sure we get our controls. Okay, ZXY, ZXY. We get to our head control. We'll switch that, ZXY, even our hat control. We'll do the same with it, ZXY. And now for the arms, or actually let's even get to the shoulders. We'll do the same thing, ZXY, ZXY. Now I do want to discuss about the arms. Yes, we can use ZXY. Okay, I would prefer to use that too. But there are times where you may need to even switch the rotation order for your arms. That all depends on what type of animation you're doing. I remember I was working on this animation of this character thinking, and he had a pen in his hand, and he was tapping, using one hand to control the pen and tapping the pen in the opposite hand. Okay, so if you could picture that. But he was thinking, and I realized that XZY wasn't the best option for that, so I had to switch it. So again, that all depends on what your character's doing, and that really just applied for the hand, but again, that could apply to any other control. But with that now discussed, we have now switched our controls to a good rotation order, and we now understand how that works. So when it comes to animating this guy, we can run into or avoid running into that bad problem of gimbal lock. Now, also wanted to explain that we are making a few other controls. That's going to be for our flashlight when it comes time to setting that up, as well as our keys when it comes time for that. We'll want to have the handle set to that as well. But for right now, that does wrap up this lesson, and we have the main controls for this guy pretty much complete, save of course the blend shapes. So that actually leads us to the next lesson, which will go ahead and explore setting up blend shapes for this. And again, we're just going to use one blend shape. We're going to see how we can set up the controls to be really animation friendly. And by doing so, we will pretty much be done with the setup of this guy, save, of course, adding the buttons and also the other accessories. So that finishes this lesson, and in the next lesson, we'll see if we can add a cool little blend shape to this character.